I am making a movie with the RED Komodo. That is what this setup is right here. I did a video recently talking about why I'm using the RED Komodo. And so if you hadn't seen that, check it out. And it talks about the cage that I put on this camera. And I mentioned that I would do some subsequent videos talking about the rest of the rig. There are a lot of videos online on YouTube about the RED Komodo. So it's nothing new per se, but my main focus is how I'm using this camera, and that is to shoot a movie. There's been debate since this camera came out on what kind of uses you use for this type of setup. And to me, there's no debate. You see these different comparisons against this in a C70 or an FS6 or even an FX3, any number of mirrorless cameras or other type of what I would call run and gun documentary cameras. That's not what this is. And so what I want to do is just go over briefly the components that make up this rig. Again, in my first video, I talked about the cage. And so for this kind of setup, you really do need a cage, because what the cage allows you to do is attach these other accessories. And the other accessories mainly in this configuration are this handle, which then holds my monitor. And then on this side here, I have another handle, just a hand grip. And on the bottom, I have a base plate. And then I have rods, and the rods hold the follow focus. And they also would hold a lens support, which I'm not using on this one. This is borderline, seems to be okay. And you can also put other accessories on here too. Now, importantly, on my particular setup, I am a huge fan of these Kessler quick release systems. So the plate goes onto my Kessler, mounts onto this, and then it just drops right in, locks in, and now the camera is secure. And I'm using a Sockler tripod. This is a medium duty tripod, so it holds, I believe, 17 pounds, so it does fine with the setup. Although with this particular lens on here, it is front heavy, which I don't love. I'll talk about the lens in just a second. For power, I got these small little nano style batteries. They are 99 watt though, so they last maybe 3 or so hours. And to connect it to that, I'm using a Tilta V-mount battery converter. So it slides right into the back, because the Komodo actually takes traditional batteries, and I use it that way depending on the configuration. That's what I would call more my lightweight configuration. This is more of my full setup. This is obviously lives on a tripod or a dolly. If you're doing anything like a gimbal shot or anything like that, you wouldn't use this setup. And I mentioned this lens. This is a DZO 20-55. Now, right now I'm testing lenses. This is not my lens. I don't own this. I rented it from Borrowed Lenses. It's a great zoom range, 20-55. And so on the RED Komodo, which has a 1.33 crop, it is basically a 26 to 75 millimeter compared to full frame equivalent. So that's a nice zoom range. And so I think on a movie, and if you didn't watch my previous video, I am directing and DPing the film. And so that's a lot to have on my shoulders. And I'm thinking a zoom might be the way to go. I'm considering primes too. I'm still testing lenses. I'm going to check out the DZO primes. I'm also looking at the nanomorph, the Laowa anamorphic lenses. And additionally, I'm considering a higher end, like an Angino lens, a zoom lens, or even I'm considering Cook, the S4 minis. This Mattebox is a real simple little Mattebox from Small Rig. And right now I have a Schneider ND filter in there. Because that's one thing about this lens, if you've played with it or if you own it, it's got an 86 millimeter filter thread. So that's a little bit unusual. Almost all the filters I have are 77 millimeter, and I have some 82 millimeter. And so none of the filters fit on there. So you have to use a Mattebox. And these are 4 by 5.65, which are industry standard. I also have a larger Mattebox that can fit on the rails, and I can put multiple filters in there. This one, I think you can only put one in there. However, if I had an 86 millimeter filter, I could screw it on that and then put this on top of that and have 2 filters. And then on top here, I've got a Portkeys monitor. And this is a great little monitor. The nice thing about this one is it is wireless. And so you see this antenna here. I can control the Komodo through this monitor very easily. And then of course the Komodo has a great feature that you can control the camera with your iPhone or an iPad through the RED Control app. And I got to say, that is a really great app. And I'm probably going to use that some. On top of the Komodo, of course, it has its own touchscreen to do the settings and such. And it's usable, and I do use it, but I find having an external monitor is really the way to go. And then this follow focus is a really affordable one from Small Rig as well. It's only $100 or so, and it works great. For this movie, this is a very small micro budget film. I'm probably going to be the focus puller as well for most stuff. I have any complicated shots, I'll set up a little wireless follow focus rig and I'll have someone on another monitor pulling focus. But for the most part, it's going to be me. And so again, I need to keep it simple. That's why I may end up going with primes instead of this big behemoth zoom, because you can see how small the RED Komodo body is. The zoom makes it pretty big and unwieldy, especially if I was doing handheld, which I'm not. This movie is all on sticks, or I got some slider dolly shots and then a few gimbal shots. Again, for a gimbal, I will 100% use a different lens. And I considered using, I have a Sigma, the classic Sigma 18-35 that is autofocus. And the Komodo does have autofocus and it works surprisingly well, much better than you would think. However, if you've done any research on lenses, one of the reasons you shoot on cinema glass is not just because they're more robust and they have manual controls, etc. They also have a different look. They typically have more of a creamy roll off to the bokeh and the highlights as well. And that's one thing I like about these DZO. They give a more cinematic image. They just do. I really want, again, for this movie, but really any movie, a softer, more cinematic, pleasing, organic look. I know it's a lot of adjectives there. And I'm probably going to put a glimmer glass on the front here in the Mattebox, or a Hollywood Black Magic. I haven't decided yet. And so I still have a lot of decisions I need to make, but this is my initial setup and what I've come to really like. And I think this is what I will end up using on the movie, because even if I end up going with primes, I'm probably going to rent this zoom anyway and use this as my utility lens, my everyday lens. And then for places I need to put the camera that are more small, like maybe up against a wall or something, or again on a gimbal, I'll go with a smaller prime, because most primes, if I go with the DZO, they're about half the size, probably cut off about right here. I do have an EF adapter on here because this is an RF mount camera. And so the EF adapter sticks out a little bit, but I really like the way these DZO look. You've heard it multiple times, I'm sure, if you've seen videos about this. They really are kind of an in-between between modern clinical and a vintage. They're not vintage, but they're also not clinical. They're right in between, which again, for me, is perfect. And then the price point is great too. This zoom is about $2,500. I'm not buying it, I'm renting it. And then all the primes are about $1,400. They're great bang for the buck, but I don't think I'm sacrificing by using these. So anyway, the movie is called Casey's Favorite Song. I'm shooting it in June of 2023, and I'll have a link in the description if you want to follow along. It's so cool today how indie filmmakers can afford a setup like this, because in the end, even if I bought all this, you're talking about 10 grand roughly, which sounds like a chunk of change, but in reality, that's pretty affordable for what you're getting. So yeah, I say it all the time, it's a great time to be a filmmaker. And so hopefully you can learn something from my adventures here. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun, and I will see you in the next video.